This is Tina Douglas, and you're listening to the Liam Photography Podcast with your host, my husband, Liam Douglas. Enjoy!
Welcome back to the show. Liam here, and this is episode 501 of the Liam Photography Podcast for the week of April 9th, 2026. In today's episode, remote cameras, more about Napalm Girl image, and Artemis II, as well as other stories from our good friends at Petapixel for this week. A wide-ranging camera trap survey in the largely unexplored Amazon of Asia has captured rare images of endangered and elusive animals. A camera trap survey conducted through 2025 has provided new insight into the biodiversity of the Annamite Mountains, recording a wide range of threatened and rarely seen species across forests spanning Laos, Vietnam, and northeastern Cambodia. The images highlight the ecological significance of the Southeast Asia's most important forest landscape, which stretches about 683 miles. The survey was led by Fauna and Flora's Cambodian program in partnership with the Ministry of Environment of Cambodia and the Provincial Environment Department in Ratchankari. I don't know if I pronounced that right or not, with support from local indigenous communities. Residents helped identify camera locations, transport equipment, and retrieve memory cards from remote parts of the protected area. The camera traps recorded a wide variety of wildlife, including Asian elephants, dholes, clouded leopards, marbled cat stump-tailed mascaws, and gray peacock pheasants. Footage showed two sun bears interacting playfully, a species recognizable by the orange-yellow marking on its chest. The cameras also captured images of the Annamite striped rabbit, an endangered species named after the mountain range. Experts say it has only rarely been photographed and was not known to science until 1996. Among the bird species recorded was a great hornbill, whose presence is considered a sign of healthy forest ecosystem. Quote, the Annamite Mountains range is alive with a host of incredible creatures, such as each playing a critical role in maintaining the forest ecosystem that are vital to the health of our planet, Gareth Goldthrope, Senior Technical Advisor Asia Pacific at Fauna and Flora, says in a statement. Quote, this camera trap data allows us to discover some of the Annamite's rarest species, which also understanding more about their behavior, preferred topography, and their interactions with human settlements, end quote. Fauna and Flora has worked in the Annamites since the 1990s to help protect the region's forests. According to the organization, data from the long-term camera trap survey shows that key threats to wildlife include habitat encroachment and fragmentation, as well as widespread snaring, which can rapidly deplete animal populations even in otherwise intact forests. Previously, Petapixel reported on a first-of-its-kind camera survey on a remote Tasmanian island, which captured images of species that are seldom seen by humans. And I thought this was a great story. As you know, if you follow me at all, I am an avid wildlife photographer, but for the wildlife photography, it's more of a hobby of mine. It's just something I like to do as something I'm passionate about and a form of stress relief. So I thought this was a great story to include this week, and I highly recommend you go to the show notes for today's episode, click on the link for this story, and check out some of the beautiful camera trap animal images for yourself. There are some really great ones in there. If there is a villain in the Stringer documentary, then it is not so much Nick Ut, the AP photographer who has long been credited with taking the famous Napalm Girl photograph, but Horst Faas, the chief of photos in Saigon, who allegedly swapped the credit on Napalm Girl. But who is Horst Faas? Before the film, he was probably best known as the photographer and editor who spent more time covering the Vietnam War than any other journalist. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1965 for his images of the conflict and is also heralded for his work as a photo editor, not just for Napalm Girl, but also for Eddie Adams' notorious photo Saigon Execution. However, the Stringer documentary on Netflix essentially says this: Horst Faas ordered the Napalm Girl credit to be changed from a local freelancer to AP staff photographer Nick Utt, cheating the freelancer out of a lifetime of accolades and glory. The film suggests that Faas did this out of loyalty to Utt, out of a compassion that Faas felt for the death of Utt's brother, and because Faas was playing to win and didn't want an iconic AP photo credited to a photographer who was not staff. It's a series of devastating accusations made all the more galling by the fact that Faas died in 2012. His absence and inability to speak for himself in the Stringer makes him a convenient scapegoat. Petapixel has tried for months to get in touch with someone who could speak for Faas, eventually finding Michael Ebert, who met Faas in the late 1990s through his work with the German Society for Photography and oversees Faas's estate and archives. Ebert tells Petapixel that the Faas estate consists mainly of personal memorabilia, documents, and magazines, but there are also hidden treasures like hard drives of images and a number of Faas's prints that no longer have negatives. AP still holds the rights to Faas's images. Quote, "We occasionally make new discoveries," Ebert says. "For instance, in 2018, we found 7 Tri-X pan negatives and were able to verify that Nick Utt had taken them on June 8th in Trang Bang. Unfortunately, these aren't particularly significant images," end quote. Ebert says that he was contacted about the Stringer last year by the Associated Press and the Seven Foundation. The AP wanted to help checking the authenticity of a photo, but says his conversation with Fiona Turner, one of the film's producers, was limited to a few emails. Quote, "I got the impression that the producers didn't think my opinion fit into their film concept," he says. "It was similar to other people involved, like Fox Butterfield from the New York Times," end quote. Fox Butterfield, a former New York Times journalist who was present at the scene of Napalm Girl and witnessed the severely injured Kim Fock, told Variety last year that, quote, "It was hard for me to watch somebody claiming that Nick didn't take that picture. I was on scene and I saw the real thing," end quote. Butterfield said he did speak to the filmmakers, but they would only share their evidence with him if he signed a non-disclosure agreement, which he refused to do. Quote, "There's a lot of criticism in the film," Ebert says. "Above all, the journalistic approach is criticized, plus there are plenty of technical errors." He cites one factual error in the film, that Malcolm Brown won his Pulitzer Prize for the Burning Monk photo. That's not true, he says. Mal received the Pulitzer Prize for his book on the early phase of the Vietnam War, end quote. As for the main question in the Stringer, did Nick take the photo or not? If he didn't, then how did it end up at the AP office, and did Horst Faas instruct Carl Robinson to misattribute it? Ebert says that while they are almost impossible to answer, he doesn't believe Faas switched the credit. Quote, "Horst was too upright and too intelligent for that," says Ebert. "Ultimately, one must conclude that the absolute truth will remain hidden in the fog of war after more than 50 years and the death of most of the eyewitnesses. Carl Robinson is the key piece in the documentary. It is his claim that as a photo editor in the Saigon AP office, he was the one who swapped the photo credit at the behest of Horst Faas. Quote, "Faas and Robinson did not always have the best relationship," says Ebert. Although Horst had installed Robinson as his successor, the latter's performance was evidently not up to par. Horst was set to become the AP's Asia photo chief and therefore left Saigon. Ebert continues, quote, "When the Viet Cong's Easter Offensive began in 1972, Faas had to return because AP lost the battle against rival agency UPI. That was the reason Horst was in Saigon at all when the photo of Napalm Girl was taken." Ebert characterizes Robinson as an underdog in the story of Napalm Girl prior to the Stringer being released. Quote, "After all, he was considered the photo editor who refused to publish what is probably the most important war photo of the 20th century, Ebert says. Perhaps that's comparable to an editor who rejected the manuscript for Harry Potter," end quote. Ebert says that before the stringer, it was well known that Carl Robinson had repeatedly dropped hints in Vietnam veteran circles, but he was often rebuked by colleagues, including the legendary war photographer Tim Page, who he says reacted very grimly to Robinson's claims. Ultimately, one must conclude that the absolute truth will remain hidden in the fog of war after more than 50 years and the death of most of the eyewitnesses. Ebert also points to the key witnesses in AP's Saigon Bureau that day who have since died, like Yuichi Jackson, Ishikai, a key witness who developed the film. Quote, those who have passed away never doubted Nick Ut's authorship, and those who are still alive view the allegation with skepticism at the very least, he says. Faas was born in Berlin in 1933, the same year the Nazi Party took control of Germany. Horst belonged to the generation of war children, Ebert says. Quote, I once put it this way, Horst Faas was either in a war, facing a war, or recovering from a war, end quote. By the age of 21, Faas had established himself as a photojournalist capable of covering major events. He joined AP in 1956 and stayed with the news agency until his retirement in 2004, covering conflicts in Vietnam, Laos, the Congo, Algeria, and Bangladesh along the way. Despite a lifetime spent covering strife, Ebert, who met Faas later in his life, knew him as an empathetic person. Quote, camaraderies, esprit de corps, and loyalty were very important to him, he says. He always stood 100% behind his staff, but also behind AP, end quote. In The Stringer, Gary Knight calls Faas complex, a paradox, tough, competitive, and yet capable of great compassion. Ebert says that if someone crossed a line, Faas would be strict. Quote, he respected professionalism and competence, and he was very impressively well educated, adds Ebert. Beyond that, he was a very sensual person who greatly appreciated good food and a glass of good wine, end quote. Ultimately, Ebert believes that despite the film's conclusion that Faas changed the credit on Napalm Girl, which prompted World Press Photo to revoke Nick Ut's credit, his legendary reputation will remain intact. Quote, his body of work and reputation are so enduring that this film has not harmed him, he says. Remarkably, there is a very large group of colleagues who still believe that Nick Ut took the photo, end quote. After the Stringer documentary was released on Netflix last year, Nick Ut has filed a defamation lawsuit against the streaming service and the Seven Foundation over claims that he did not take the photo. And it's interesting to see that this photo credit thing is still dragging on after 50 years. And I think it's a little bit crazy for people to try to claim that Nick Ut did not take that photo. It's always been my understanding that he did. Now, I didn't know any of the people directly involved, but I don't know. I mean, me personally, I couldn't see someone like Faas, who was very dedicated to professionalism, competence, honesty, and all of that in reporting and photojournalism. I just can't see him having, swapped the credit on that photo. It just doesn't make any sense to me. The photos captured by the Artemis II team have been beautiful to behold and have brought two brands to the forefront of the discussion, Nikon and Apple. Neither brand paid their way into this position, and that's the best endorsement anyone can ask for. For those that might not know this, Nikon and Apple did not pay to have their cameras and phones included in NASA's Artemis II mission. They were selected either because they survived rigorous testing or because they were what the team wanted to use, or a combination of the two. I bring this up because over the weekend I saw a lot of discussion on threads about Nikon's involvement, either asking how much Nikon had to pay to get its cameras into the mission, or dunking on Hasselblad for somehow allowing it to happen. That is not how it works. Hasselblad's history with NASA might be more well known than Nikon's because its cameras were used during the Apollo 11 mission to the moon back in 1969, resulting in some of the most famous photos of space exploration ever captured. But starting with Apollo 15 mission in 1971 and up until this day, Nikon has been NASA's go-to choice for cameras in space. Quote, since the Apollo 15 mission more than 50 years ago, Nikon cameras and lenses have been used by NASA for space exploration, Nikon explains. Starting in 1999, Nikon cameras, the Nikon F5, and the Nikkor lenses have been used aboard the ISS to aid in scientific research, maintenance, and aiding astronauts capturing the iconic images of the Earth, the heavens, and beyond. End quote. That means NASA has been using Nikon cameras for substantially longer than it ever used Hasselblad cameras, and through 3 eras of photography: film, digital SLR, and now mirrorless. Nikon cameras were chosen for this because space is a harsh, unforgiving environment. Equipment must be able to withstand substantial temperature swings and cosmic radiation, especially if they're going to be used on the moon, which Nikon Z9 is slated to be during the upcoming Artemis II mission. Quote, saying we are excited to see the images coming back from the Artemis II mission crew is an understatement. It is an unfathomable honor to contribute to something so monumental, this rare moment when all of humanity looks upward together, unified by the images that push the boundaries of what we know. Watching NASA's live streams and seeing the crew work with our cameras and lenses is profoundly humbling. Each of us is witnessing history unfold in real time, while we at Nikon are all excited for what's to come. It's important that the focus remains on the mission and the crew who are bravely going further than any humans before. Hiroyuki Ikigama, Nikon Senior Executive Vice President, General Manager of Imaging Business Group, and General Manager of Imaging Business Unit, tells Petapixel. Quote, for more than 50 years, beginning with Apollo 15, the most recent Artemis mission, Nikon and NASA have worked together closely. Our core objective has always been to best equip the crew and prioritize the mission. Nikon cameras and lenses have supported scientific research, maintenance, while also enabling astronauts to capture the most iconic images, including the recent portrait of the Earth from Artemis II crew. Nikon cameras and lenses have also been used aboard the International Space Station, starting with the F5 film SLR and now continuing with the mirrorless Z9. End quote. Quote, while we previously announced our collaboration with the Artemis team to help develop the HULC, or Handheld Universal Lunar Camera System, we were pleasantly surprised to learn that they were also taking the Z9 mirrorless camera into space as part of the recent Artemis II mission for testing to help further the development of space camera technology. The next stop will be the lunar surface, and we have been working extensively with the teams to make the Nikon Z9 the first mirrorless handheld camera on the moon. And yet, this is only the beginning. The horizon ahead holds possibilities greater than anything we've seen. End quote. The trust astronauts have put in their gear means that the certification and testing process is long and arduous. That's why the Artemis II team is mainly using Nikon D5 cameras. They know they're going to work, even if they're far from the latest technology. That's why it's pretty surprising that Apple iPhones made their way into the Artemis II mission. As the New York Times explains, there is a lot to consider when certifying a handheld smartphone for use in space. For example, what happens if it breaks? That and other concerns were clearly addressed. However, and the iPhone 17 was used to capture a few selfies from the mission with Earth in the background. The mission is the first time an iPhone is fully qualified for extended use in orbit, Apple tells Petapixel. Since the iPhones on the mission can't connect to the internet or Bluetooth, their use is pretty limited. But it's hard to argue with the impact of a simple selfie, so it being used for that might just have been the entire point. It's pretty easy to see that it's an outstanding selfie machine that the crew is likely familiar and comfortable with. Photos are powerful, and the Artemis has shared several that have captured the world's attention. NASA knows the kind of photos the iPhone can get are great for PR. Seeing an astronaut's face next to the full shot of the Earth is beautifully humanizing. They're photos that have incredible impact, and the iPhone is arguably a lot better at getting that kind of photo than the Nikon cameras the team is also equipped with. These are the best endorsements that any brand can ever hope for, precisely because they cannot be bought. Anyone paying attention to this incredible feat of science and technology will see Nikon and Apple's name involved and can walk away knowing those were picked because they're great for the tasks assigned to them, and that's it. Not every camera nor every smartphone could have performed its job in this environment. We'll probably never know which ones would have failed and why, but we sure will remember the ones that succeeded. And I thought this was a great story to share with my audience this week. And it kills me when I see silly comments on social media like, oh, how much did Nikon pay to get their cameras into the Artemis mission? Like this article says, NASA and Nikon have been working together for like 50 years. I always knew that. I know it's my understanding that the original Apollo 11, they used Hasselblad cameras because at that time Hasselblad was the only camera system that's certified for use in space, that passed all the testings and benchmarks and all of that good stuff. But you got to keep in mind that Hasselblad cameras are extremely expensive. So if NASA can get good performance from the Nikon series, and the Nikons are a lot less expensive than Hasselblads, then that's just a common sense thing. There's no great mystery and there's no conspiracy that Nikon is paying off NASA. I mean, to think otherwise is just absolutely silly, in my opinion. A darkroom printer scrapbook containing previously unseen photos that belonged to Lee Miller and Cecil Beaton had been unearthed and acquired by the University of Oxford's Bodleian Libraries. Holland Hupp was a photographic assistant of two of Britain's most iconic photographers and kept a scrapbook for their prints, including a different frame of Miller's famous portrait showing her bathing in Adolf Hitler's bathtub in his Munich apartment, the same day the Nazi leader died. Both Miller and Beaton worked for Vogue magazine, and Hupp was the darkroom printer in the London office. The album spans from 1943 to 1949, and the photographs reflect that tumultuous time as the Second World War came to an end. The prints were made by Hupp in Vogue's London darkroom. The unprocessed negatives were sent by Miller and Beaton, often from the front lines in Europe. The book is a working record that documents Hupp's favorite photos that he was asked to process and print. Hupp kept the album in his personal possession until his death. The album has never been displayed in public before. Quote, "This is the story of my favorite photographer, Lee Miller, Vogue war correspondent," Hupp wrote in the book. She followed the American army from the beaches of Normandy 5 days after D-Day up to the final entry into Berlin, and after that she continued her journey visiting countries that had been occupied, having many exciting experiences. These are a few of the beautiful pictures she sent back. According to a press release, Miller trained Hupp as her assistant in 1940, later charging him with taking over darkroom production while she went away to war as a correspondent. Miller's life story was recently made into a movie where she was played by Kate Winslet. Miller, a former Vogue model, was one of the first accredited female war reporters. The album was acquired by the Bodleian Library through photography dealer Michael Hopen, who obtained it directly from the Hupp family. He tells the Times of London that it was a surprise to him that Miller entrusted such momentous photographs to Hupp. That relationship was clearly very important, Hoppen tells the newspaper, and he has clearly been instrumental in showing us how extraordinarily brave this woman was. The album captures many other pivotal moments in Miller's war photography, including the German army's surrender to the U.S., the liberation of Dachau and Buchenwald, and an arresting image of two captured and beaten SS officers. Other images reflect Miller's strong connection to the contemporary artistic circles of the day. One photograph shows Miller in her army uniform in conversation with Pablo Picasso. Hupp also worked as a photographic assistant to Cecil Beaton, who was stationed in North Africa during the 1940s. Beaton's photographs from the region, also included in the album, document the stark, surreal beauty of the desert landscape in sharp contrast to the harrowing scenes from wartime Europe. Now part of the Bodleian's collection, the album will undergo conservation and cataloging before being made available to researchers. In time, the Bodleian plans to explore opportunities for public display and wider access. And I think it's really great that Hupp was able to save some of those iconic images and that he put them into a type of scrapbook. I think that's really great, and I look forward to that getting released to the public on display or whatever the case may be, so I can see some of that work for myself. It's truly exciting. The NASA Artemis II crew had a very eventful April 6th. After breaking Apollo 13's record for the farthest distance humans ever been from Earth, the crew got busy taking a lot of photos, including unique photos of the moon and beautiful eclipse photos unlike anything visible on Earth. From their perspective, orbiting the moon in the Orion spacecraft, the Artemis II crew experienced a very special solar eclipse with 54 minutes of totality. On Earth, given the moon's relative size and distance, totality only lasts a few minutes in most cases during a solar eclipse. However, the Artemis II crew, which flew nearly 253,000 miles, or almost 407,000 kilometers from Earth, was so close to the moon that it was large enough from their perspective to cover the sun for nearly an hour. The crew passed within 4,070 miles, or 6,550 kilometers, of the lunar surface on April 6, 2026. Quote, "The corona forms a glowing halo around the dark lunar disk, revealing details of the sun's outer atmosphere, typically hidden by its brightness. Also visible are stars typically too faint to see when imaging the moon, but with the moon in darkness, stars are readily imaged," NASA explains. This unique vantage point provides both a striking visual and a valuable opportunity for astronauts to document and describe the corona during humanity's return to deep space. The faint glow of the near side of the moon is visible in this image, having been illuminated by light reflected off the Earth. End quote. This is also one of the relatively rare photos thus far the Artemis crew captured using the 45-megapixel Nikon Z9 mirrorless camera that they successfully campaigned to get added to the ship's manifest at the last minute. During NASA's lengthy Artemis II live stream, the crew discussed camera placement and settings, noting the Z9 would be at window for eclipse work. That said, the Nikon D5 also took its turn during the eclipse, capturing a pair of photos. The first shows a partial view of the moon during the total solar eclipse on the right, while a glowing orb is visible in the distant background. That silver glint is the planet Venus, visible because the moon blocks the sun's light. The incredible photo is captured at ISO 40,000, another example of Nikon D5's exceptional high ISO capabilities. The second eclipse shot shows the sun beginning to peek out from behind the moon as totality ended. NASA also equipped with the Artemis II crew with specialized rugged GoPro Hero 4 cameras. These cameras, originally released back in 2014, are primarily recording footage as part of a National Geographic project. However, the crew has also been using them to capture imagery in space, including some photos of the solar eclipse. Total solar eclipses on Earth are a very valuable opportunity for scientists to study the sun. There is a very good reason that the European Space Agency built an entire mission, Proba 3, to create artificial solar eclipses in space using precisely controlled spacecraft. The NASA Artemis II mission just got its own taste of a lengthy solar eclipse, and scientists will be poring over the data for a long time. In the meantime, everyone else gets to enjoy unique, awesome photos of that spectacle. And I think it was really cool that they were able to experience an eclipse while they were up there on their mission. I think that's really awesome. And they definitely did get some beautiful images. I highly recommend that you go to the show notes for today's episode, click on the link to the original story at Petapixel, and check out those fantastic images for yourself. Remember to check out the Liam Photography Podcast Facebook group. It is a private group, and you must answer a security question to join, which is the name of the host of the show, myself, Liam. And I've also opened it up to allow you to give the name of a previous guest on the show to show that you're a listener. Once you are in the group, you are free to post your own original work. Additionally, I am the admin of the Fujifilm GFX 50R group, which is the largest group for the 50R on Facebook. If you own or plan to own the 50R, you can request to join that group. You can find my work at liamphotography.net and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at liamphotoatl. If you like abandoned buildings and history, you can find my project at forgottenpiecesofgeorgia.com. All right, that's going to wrap up episode 501 of the Liam Photography Podcast. I want to thank all of my listeners for subscribing, rating, and reviewing us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you might be getting your podcast. If you're not currently a subscriber, why not? It doesn't cost you anything but a second of your time to smack that subscribe button. So do it now, please, as well as share the show out on social media and elsewhere with all your photography friends and ask them to give it a subscribe and listen as well. Also wanted to remind you to stop by the Liam Photography YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel, and smack that bell. Check out my latest videos. The channel is growing still, which is fantastic. I know it's a long and slow process, but I am slowly getting closer to the 100,000 subscriber mark, which is truly exciting. Hopefully I'll get there before the end of this year. The channel is currently at, I think, 94,400 subscribers or something like that. So hopefully within the next few months, we'll make it to 100,000 and we'll have a nice giveaway, possibly one prize, or I may do up to 3 prizes. I haven't decided yet. So definitely make sure you're subscribed to both this show and the YouTube channel so you don't miss that announcement when the contest starts and what the prizes will be. All right, I will see you all again next Thursday.